Welcome everybody and good evening, and thank you for joining us for IHA's first webinar for 2021. For those that don't know me, I'm Kylie Stothers, the Director of Workforce Development at IHA. Before we commence this evening's webinar, I'd just like to take the time to pay my deep respects to Country, and I acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the many lands and waters on which you're all dialing in from this evening or watching this webinar recording. We thank our custodians for their continual care of Country, and we thank them for their leadership, particularly during what was an interesting year during 2020 for IHA members. I also give my thanks to elders past, present and future. So it gives me the great pleasure this evening to welcome John Briggs to this evening's webinar. Thank you, John, for that beautiful Dig session to start us. It really made me feel grounded. Thank you so much for that connection. I am going to hand over to John and introduce himself. He's got an amazing biography. We are so honoured that he's been able to join us for this webinar. I'm really looking forward to it myself. For those of you that might be new to one of the IHA webinars, it's a little bit disconcerting because we can't really see each other, but you can see John and myself. I will be turning my camera off soon, but please feel free to use the chat space there. Let us know who's online and say g'day to everybody, and put your questions in there as well to John as well. No question's a silly question, and we'll do our best to absolutely answer those this evening. And also that people know we are recording the session, hence why we haven't got the cameras switched on for those that are dialing in with us. So without any further interruptions, I'm now going to hand over to you, John, and really looking forward to this webinar. So thanks, John.
Thank you, Kylie, and definitely a wonderful warm welcome for everybody, and thanks for acknowledging the traditional custodians as well. We're all meeting today. I'd like to acknowledge my mob, the Yorta Yorta Gunai from down in Victoria there. I was born on a little community down there called Lake Tyers, which is near Lakes Entrance. Look, that's in Victoria, in regional Victoria. And if you're still not sure where that part of Australia is, that's where they play real football, by the way. Of course, I'm talking about the AFL. But one of the things about IHA is that it's a privilege to come back and have a discussion this evening about running a business. And hopefully I can provide not only a lens on how to run a business, but some of the considerations around Indigenous perspectives of running a business. A couple of things I'd like to really make clear to anyone that's listening is that I don't see myself as an expert that knows everything. So I don't want to come across like a big noter who knows everything. I'm still learning every day about running a business, and I just wanted to be really clear about that. But I hope that the experience that I've had in running my own business, particularly my consulting firm, John Briggs Consultancy, for the last 12 years, has given me an insight into how to become independent, how to look after yourself, what are the considerations, what are the highs and lows, and the emotional experience of running a business. There's actually a lot that goes in it. It's not just about sending an invoice and getting paid and hoping that it just continues like that. There's a lot more to it than that. So I've got a bit of a PowerPoint presentation, which I hope you can see. It's an IHA product. So I'm just working in partnership with IHA. And I'd like to thank them deeply for inviting me back, but also firstly giving me the opportunity to have this conversation back in December last year. And it was nice to know that it was received well and that there's still some interest in this space. So thanks so much, IHA, and particularly Tanya and Donna for the leadership you show in broadening people's conversations around Indigenous engagement. As we know, there's Indigenous procurement policy that are run by Commonwealth and state governments with set targets for our mob to run our own businesses. So they provide a lot of incentive. But that incentive's a good start, but it's really about making sure we have the right foundation to connect with the procurement policies that have a lot of active targets. Now, they're both Commonwealth and state, and there might be listeners tonight that already know that. But for some others, that might be a discovery. So if you already know that, that's called validation. If you're not sure, we call it discovery. But if you Google Commonwealth or state Indigenous procurement policies, you'll see a little bit more about what I mean by that. Now, this is not a procurement or a policy workshop as such. It's more what we call 10 top tips of running your own business. There's a bit of dialogue that goes with that, and I really hope you enjoy the dialogue. But more importantly, I want you to know that you have a voice. So please share your comments, questions, and thoughts as we go through the duration of our presentation, which is around about 60 minutes. And what it does is allow us to interact. So I'll be following the chat box. I can see there's a few comments in there already. I'd like to say thanks very much to the people that said the dig was deadly. Thank you. And also, I want people to feel comfortable with me to share any thoughts, comments, or questions that you have. So as Kylie mentioned, there's no such thing as a silly comment or a dumb question as such. It's all about cultural safety. So I want you to feel comfortable that you can ask anything or share any thoughts, comments, or questions, but also I may not have the answer because again, unlike all of us, I'm on a continual learning journey. And it's important to acknowledge that. Running a business consulting firm for 12 years doesn't mean I know everything. I still learn from the clients and customers that I work with. And that's a regular thing for me, to learn something every day so I continually improve moving forward. So as we move forward, again, please use the chat box. I'll be checking that incrementally to hear people's thoughts, comments, or questions. But also in particular, I want you to reach out to IHAR and acknowledge the kindness that they've shown us by putting this forum together and giving us the platform and the privilege to have a conversation. So welcome today, this evening, everybody. My name's Johnny Briggs, your proud Yorta Yorta Gunai man. Looking forward to your thoughts, comments, and questions coming through the chat box. I'm broadcasting live and unscripted here this evening from a place called Logan City. Now, I hope you've heard of that before. If you haven't, you may just want to watch a current affair occasionally, because unfortunately we pop up there more often than not. We are featured in a current affair on Channel 9 on the 7 o'clock time slot. But there's also pockets of goodness, and I've been here for 25 years. It's halfway between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So I'm a long way from my home country, but I've been here for about 25 years. And I was originally working as an Aboriginal liaison officer for Centrelink. That was in the old days. I did that for about 15 years, hence why I stayed here and then continued to work in my own business. So as we move forward, everyone, I'm just going to change now the first slide and give us a little bit of an understanding of the type of conversation we're going to have this evening. But again, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians where we're all based, and to also understand the importance of doing that when we do an acknowledgement, I'd also like to acknowledge that we as Indigenous Australians are connected to one of the world's longest surviving cultures, but also we're acknowledging some of the world's oldest scientists, technicians, engineers, artists, and mathematicians. That's right, we are STEAM. And it's important to remember that we can blend our culture with our business and be successful in living in two worlds, which is where all the magic happens. And when we're running a business, it is important not to lose our identity and our connection to culture, and certainly be comfortable with that. But also remember there are certain things that we need to consider when we're running a business in what we call the mainstream. And a lot of that's about compliance, expectations, communication, running your books, making sure that you think about your spending. Anyone who's an impulsive spender, you'll need to keep that in check if you're running a business. It's really important to make sure that we also have the resources to trade. But an acknowledgement of country is a wonderful way to start our presentation. So why are we here? Well, obviously you're interested in understanding more about running a business, or what to be aware of in setting up and maintaining that setup. So setting up's easy, it's the retention that becomes the challenge. So staying and setting up for the long game is really one of the important aspects of measuring your success. You've got to be in it long enough to measure your success as well. So again, please share your thoughts. And Also, what are people's perceptions of today? What do you really want to hear discussed, questioned, or commented on? If there are certain things you want to hear from in a business context, please share those via the chat box. And that might be anything to do with running a business or setting it up or maintaining it. And you can send that through the chat box. So I'm going to move to the next slide now and also remind us of feeling comfortable to share our thoughts, comments, or questions because of the definition of cultural safety, which is about bringing like-minded people together and having conversations that sometimes might be uncomfortable, but be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because when we think about being respectful to each other, kindness, empathy, and looking at the lens of the power of humanity, it's really easy to have uncomfortable conversations or difficult conversations. So some of the things might be a little bit uncomfortable this evening, but that's the nature of telling the truth and what the truth looks like for us to consider, acknowledge, and work with. So I'm not going to read that definition because I know you can see that, but a lot of the work that we do is to make clear to people, become comfortable first with each other. So we might talk about things tonight that we may not agree on, but that still means we can be friends. It's not about excluding someone because we don't have the same view. So cultural safety and competence is a really key area for anyone working in the Indigenous space. But one of the things I like to do in business is to remind other businesses, particularly in the mainstream, of the importance of their cultural safety and what that means from their end, because it actually is two ways. So what I mean by that is that a lot of the big corporates today, so I work a lot in the corporate space, so I work for large employers like Coles Group, which is Coles Liquor Supermarkets and Express. I work for the Kmart Group, a couple of universities, superannuation companies, and a few other smaller groups that are that do different things around building their cultural safety so that they can be more effective in not only Indigenous engagement through the vehicle of employment, but also working effectively with our businesses. And that's all about setting people up for success, but factoring in what can get in the way around failure. And what we always talk about in building cultural safety and competency is building the relationship before the partnership. So when you're running a business, quite often a corporate might approach your business and want to put you in their supply chain, and they'll want to register you as a vendor so that you become pre-qualified to do business in their supply chain. It's important to point out to them what you want to see happen as well, particularly around cultural safety, but also what you can do to assist them on their journey. I'm just checking in. Kylie's given a wonderful comment there, very wise, which is being uncomfortable means we are in a space to learn. And that's what I call professional development. So I like being comfortable with being uncomfortable because it means I'm forced to come out of my comfort zone and learn. And that's great commentary. And thanks so much, Kylie, for the validation from there. And also to the people that have just dialed in and said, look, welcome from my country. I can see there's someone there that's dialed in welcoming us from Larrakia country as well. And I think that might be Kylie. But look, please share your thoughts, comments, or questions as we move through today's conversation. So I want to put this question to you now. If you were approached by a corporate or a government department and they wanted to do business with you, how would you help them build the relationship before the partnership? Because when they're asking you to come and do business, that's really about forming a partnership. And if you want that partnership to become long-term, and I've been really lucky, I'm now in my 11th year with Coles, and I'm really proud to tell people that for a number of reasons. And that's about longevity, because Coles has been very respectful to me, but I've also been respectful to them. It's a two-way interaction. So when we talk about relationship before partnership, what is it that you're seeking from the relationship? What are we seeking to set up the foundations for success before we move into the partnership? So I always focus on the lens of cultural safety. You can't do cultural safety in 5 minutes. I think you all know that. And if you don't, I'm encouraging people to think you can't particularly put a measurement on how that works. But what I always do is like to make it clear what I expect from the relationship or the partnership, and what do they expect. So again, a lot of the services I provide are not goods as such, they're more services and programs because it's related to consulting. So I do a lot of facilitation of workshops, keynotes, and presenting cultural competency training. But really it's about becoming comfortable first so that your partnership becomes long-term. Are there any thoughts, comments, or questions coming through the chat box around cultural safety and competency? What does it mean? How do I do it? Can I measure it? You know, if there's some of the questions you're thinking, please put them through the chat box. But likewise, if you're just happy to listen, we really appreciate that as well. So I might just move forward now and look at the next slide. Now, this is not death by PowerPoint. The slides are giving us a visual guidance of the structured conversation that we'll have. So as we move forward, it's important to acknowledge that the objective here is to think about an Indigenous perspective on 10 considerations or top tips, you might call them. And firstly, what I'd like you to think about before we move forward is if you're thinking about creating your own business or you're wanting to offer advice to someone, you've got to address people's curiosity first. So what do they want to get from the business? What is the core of the business? Also, what will success look like? Where will we play? What industry are we targeting? Where are we going to take our business idea? How do we get it off the ground? How will we get there? So how will we achieve success? What do we need to, what do you need, do we need to do to achieve it? And what systems do we need? So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that in the preceding slide. So what I want you to think about is mapping your business first. So people might call that creating a business plan or a capability statement. A capability statement is simply a document that allows you to articulate what do you offer? Because a lot of people ring up and get inquiries every day. And that's wonderful. There's a lot of interest in this space, particularly around consulting in the Indigenous engagement space. And when I first started running this business, I used to spend hours talking to people. You know, pick me, trying to convince them, you know, I'm deadly, I can do this for you, you know, what is it that you want? But what I found was that whilst that was a good experience and I built some really solid relationships, I also wasted a lot of time. And when I say wasted, I say that respectfully and I say it kindly, but quite often I'd tell people a lot of things about what I can do and what I think I'm good at. But the time and energy I'd spend doing that didn't always give me a return on the investment. In other words, I may not have got a booking. So I could spend hours trying to convince someone I'm good enough to do something for you or what you're inquiring about. But what I simply did was replace that long conversation with a capability statement. So now when someone rings up and makes an inquiry, I'll just simply say, please give us your email. I'm going to send you a couple of documents. And one of those will be a capability statement, which is a simple framework that says, this is what I can do. Included in that is not just your services and your products, but your costs, your prices. Because quite often when you're trying to map a business, it's not just about what you're good at or what you're interested in. It's also about offering that mapping so that people can simply read that. Now, when I first started doing a capability statement, I paid someone to do it and it cost me a fortune, which is okay because, again, you've got to take a bit of a risk and engage with professionals. But what I noticed was it ended up being 24 pages long. Now, that might sound good because you're trying to really make sure that everyone's clear about what you can offer and what you're doing. But what I found was a lot of people would say, oh, mate, that's such a long capability statement. I just got lost. So condense it. One of the tips I'm trying to offer here is you need to present your business in a way that's reader and user friendly. So what I want us just to think about is it's not just about writing down a couple of things that says, look, this is how much I charge and this is what I offer. You also need to put in things like testimonials. So if you've got references from clients, map that into your business plan. Because what a lot of your customers are wanting to know is, yep, I know how much you charge. Yep, I know what you offer. but how good are you at what you do? Can you tell me about that? Now, of course, we always struggle to big note ourselves. I get that. But there is a level of having to get past that shame factor in business and be comfortable with sharing what you actually are good at without feeling like I'm a big noter. So if you want to replace big noting yourself, go and get someone else to do it for you. And that's called a reference. It's called a character reference. And what that'll do is that'll do the big noting for you. It's okay to big note if you want people to know what you're good at. So one of the things that I would remind people to think about is don't be shame, be game. Because I struggle with this a lot, and I still do, but I've got to stop struggling with worrying about whether people think I'm a big noter or not. Because it's one of the worst things we do to each other is put shame on somebody who's having a go. So map that in your business plan. Comments like, I don't want to live with shame, or I'm not going to accept shame, or I'm not a big noter. I just want people to know I'm having a crack. I want to be independent. Put in your goals. I write statements on a whiteboard, and you won't be able to see them here, but I got them in my little office here set up where every day I can walk out into this office and I can see things that inspire me. So I just bought one of those cheap whiteboards. Cost me $10, $15, $20, whatever. You write that off on tax anyway because you're running a business. There's another tip. We'll talk about that a bit later. But also remind yourself to be kind to yourself by mapping your business plan, keeping it short and condensed, but user and reader friendly. Because what people are seeking is how much do you cost, what do you offer, and how good are you at it? And that's what your referee reports or character reference or testimonials can do. You also need to think about where are you going to get your funding from? If you're going to run a business, where are you actually going to get the money from? Now, I didn't run a business hoping that I'd get government funding. I don't get a cent off any government department or anyone for that matter, not a cent. I actually have to do fee for service, which means I deliver a service, then I send an invoice, then I get paid. But I don't send the invoice before I do the work. I do the work first, make sure the client's happy or the customer's happy. Once they're happy, and they either do that through email or you do it through chat, follow up and debrief, then I send the invoice because I'm acting with integrity. Integrity is a really powerful part of winning business. It will create word of mouth. And the other thing I've never received a cent on is funding, but I've never spent $1 on advertising. It's word of mouth. Because if you do the right thing by your customer and they enjoy the experience of working with you, it's not necessarily what you've done for them, but it's how you made them feel that will make a difference. And they will go and tell others about your work by default if you make them feel like you've looked after them, you've been respectful, you delivered on what you said. So preparing a business funding proposal quite often is about tendering. Now, I actually don't tender a lot anymore because I found that a really, really long, time-consuming space with not a lot of success. So I've been very lucky to live off word of mouth, and I'm nearly booked 3 months in advance today as we speak. Now, again, that's not big noting. I just want people to know the value of word of mouth. It's free, it's cost effective, and it literally makes sense. Excuse the pun. But what it does, it sets you up for success. So if you're preparing a funding proposal, you need to ask where you're going to aim that. Are you going to aim for government funding, Commonwealth, state? Are you using the Indigenous procurement policies to leverage that? Or you can simply do what I do, which is just work in the private sector for different organisations on a fee-for-service basis so that I'm not focused on winning tenders. I'm winning work because of word of mouth. That's a privilege, by the way. I don't see that as a right. That takes a while to get to that space. So you might, in the initial stages, need to prepare a submission for funding, which means you can go on places like vendor panels. And when you register on vendor panels, what they'll do is they'll send you tenders to apply for funding or support. And that's where you need to have your funding proposal ready to go, because sometimes you only have a very short turnaround time to match that. Point number 3 is about mapping relationships. I already talked about the power of that, but it's important to map your relationships. Who are you going to have a relationship with? So when I work with a large company, I know my relationships will quite often not just be with the Indigenous engagement team or officers, it'll actually be with mainstream employees like the head of HR or P&C or learning and development or procurement. So you need to map your relationships. And that just has to be a one-page document. I do everything on one page. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous for some, I get that, but it's just simple. I keep it visual. I put key dot points in there. I don't throw jargon in. I just simply have some dot points that allow me to firstly reflect on where I am and what I'm doing, but I can also just simply share that with another company or an organisation who's making an inquiry. So map your relationships, because your relationships are the key to your partnership. Just going to quickly check the chat box. Good to see some comments coming through, everybody. Thanks so much. Nicole, you're giving me wonderful feedback, so thank you for your support. And also a great comment from Tanya about, what tricks have you discovered to keep yourself focused and productive? Great point, Tanya. And I really like that, because it's important to remember it's a journey. And I know we use the word journey a lot, and I hear that, but it is a journey, because to stay innovative, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and think you're going to keep getting booked in the long term or keep getting the same clients coming back. You may be lucky enough, depending on what you're offering, but you've got to innovate. So I've got to look at finding gaps. So to remain entrepreneurial, I need to think about when my clients talk to me and I can't offer them what they're asking, that's an opportunity to deliver and evolve. So in other words, I might get a client that says, oh, Johnny, can you do this for me? I know it's not your core business, but is it something you can offer? Sometimes I'll have to say, actually, no, it's not my core business, but can I come back to you with a proposal? So I haven't said no, but I haven't said yes, but it gives me something to work on. So then I'll go and do some research. I'll look at the proposal, and I'm constantly learning to improve my knowledge base. I can't tell people how powerful it is to learn every day. So every day when I'm not delivering, I'm researching. So do your research. Research will build your confidence. You will learn the catch phrases and words that your clients are seeking, and it demonstrates by doing that you have a level of comprehension and understanding. So what I'd like to summarize that with is research, 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 preparation, preparation, preparation. When you're doing that, you're preparing your foundations and you're allowing your foundations to evolve by doing ongoing research. Such a simple thing to do, which, by the way, costs you this. That's right, that's a big fat Xero. Costs you nothing but goodwill and energy. But commit to the time to do that. Take notes on your research, review your notes, and then apply it. Go and talk to someone you're comfortable with, your partners, your friends, your family. Reinforce your research and your learnings by speaking it through, talk it through. It's one of the most powerful things you can do is write it down and then speak it, because I find that helps with my retention or my memory, and it locks it in. So I take key things, lock it in, and keep innovating. I first started off just doing cultural awareness training. Well, if I just rely on that, the market's too competitive now. There's 101 different cultural awareness trainers around. You probably already know this. So I can't just live off just cultural awareness training. I had to look at consulting, doing what we call listening sessions, follow up with my clients, find out what have they done since we did training, offer them further opportunities to do debrief. So it's important for us to think about ways that we can also use social media. Now, one thing I'm not really good at is social media. I've no formal training whatsoever in it, but I'm smart enough to watch others and how they do it. So I'm constantly learning off professionals. So if I get a chance to work with a comms team, I'll watch what they're doing. I'll watch them take an article and change it so that it becomes more readable and user-friendly. I'll think about how they broke the paragraphs up and how they used punctuation and how they created accent in that dialogue. Because one of the things with social media is it's really handy, but can also be a hindrance. You only need to say the wrong thing once and it goes viral. So you need to factor that in, particularly in our space when we're not only critiqued by anyone and everyone, but also our own mob critique us. So it's really important to think about your language and the words you're going to use so that you're comfortable with what goes public. If anyone follows me on LinkedIn, you'll notice I just put up a few sort of small posts about my business. It promotes my business. It promotes what I'm doing, promotes what I'm doing with a client. It hopefully shows diversity, but it doesn't go much more than that because I don't want to be trolled. I avoid everything possible on social media to be trolled. So you won't see me putting up things that are explicitly controversial, but I might put it in there implicitly. But ultimately, I'm too busy to be trolled and to deal with people's negative commentary, so I keep myself safe from that. I just stick to the facts. This is what my business offers. This is the type of clients I'm working with. So I'm showing a diversity of clients, so that people see that I'm not just working for government or corporate or the mining sector. I'm working for a large range of different providers. What that tells your clients that are watching is that you offer more than just one service. So you need to show innovation, be entrepreneurial, and be comfortable with who you are and what you're aiming for. So I hope that was helpful in thinking more about that. And thank you so much to the questions that are coming through, because it really needs to be about your comms. There's a great comment in here from Nicole Turner, and thanks so much, Nicole, our IHA chairperson, for your kindness in putting some what I call positive provocations into the chat box, which are just great questions. And I think it is tricky when we talk about, and one of the comments in the chat box, team, if you can't see it, is how do you give advice about charging? How do you work out what to charge? And that's a great question because it's in different context. So one of the things about charging is find out what your competitors are doing, which is market research. Again, that comes back to mapping your business plan. Getting ready for a proposal is to know, well, what are your competitors charging? How do you find out? You might want to engage in their programs, in their services. You might want to find out about a professional mentor. I look at mentoring in 3 levels. Ask a professional mentor, Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Find out what you should charge per hour for consulting, training, facilitation, MC, keynotes, because they are all different rates. Talk to people. That's one of your relationship maps, is mapping your relationship, is who am I going to talk to find out what I charge for certain services. Now, you might want to go in at the top level, but you've got to remember, if there's someone out there that's offering an equivalent service or product to you and it's cheaper, you put yourself at risk because people will go to the bottom line at the start. It's your quality of your service, your product, and your reputation that allows you to charge fees that are separate maybe to your competitors. You don't have to match everyone, but you do need to be aware of what's the going rate because many of your customers and clients already know that, particularly if they're shopping around. So it's important to remember that being entrepreneurial is not just about creating good ideas, it's making those ideas work. Because all of us have got good ideas. We all come up with wonderful ideas. I could do this, I could do that. What if I did this? What if I did that? I get it. But you need to turn that into action to get traction, which is making a commitment. Being disciplined is one of the biggest things to being entrepreneurial and working out the appropriate charges and costs for people by being committed to your business. So it's important to remember that, you know, these are only experiences I know. I'm not reading a textbook or I'm not telling you what I've learned anywhere except in real life. That's it. I just hope it's helpful because it's an emotional roller coaster running a business. Let me tell you, it's not all just get an invoice, get paid, and away you go. It's way more than that, I'm telling you. It's called emotional intelligence. Are you aware of your emotional intelligence? What does it even mean? Emotional intelligence. It's something I really think about a lot. The reason I wanted to tell you that is because sometimes I get really down. I get really flat. Sometimes I feel like giving up, not just on business, but giving up on life. But then I look at back and I go, you know what? Look what I've set up. Things might not be great right now, but it doesn't mean it always stays like that. So it's important to remind yourself when you're in the down times to focus on the good times, because they will come if you stay positive and focus on your emotional intelligence, which is not acting impulsively. So when I'm feeling down and I'm not feeling well, I don't make big decisions about my business because I'm not in the right frame of mind. But it's my emotional intelligence that tells me not to make that decision about the business or what's imperative, to take some time to slow down, back off, and find time to work on yourself. Now, I know that if that sounds a bit deep and warm and fuzzy, I'm not trying to be like that. I want people to really be conscious of the emotional roller coaster that goes with running a business, because it's not always deadly. There is a lot of that, but you need to prepare yourself for the down times, when you're low on money, when you're low on energy, when you're low on enthusiasm. How do you want to respond at that point? What do you want to remind yourself of? And I'll come to that a little bit later on. But excellent commentary, everyone, through the chat box. Please continue to share your thoughts, comments or questions, because the last point, number 4, is what does success look like and how do we know when we get there? You need to map that. What is success? Is success having a lot of money in the bank, or is it having wonderful relationships, not only in your professional life, but in your social life, in your personal life? What is success? What does it look like, feel like, and sound like when you get there and you're experiencing it? That's right. Look like, feel like, sound like. What do you want to hear when you feel success? Yeah, I know it'll make you feel good, but how will you see that? Does anyone have any thoughts, comments, or questions on what success looks like, particularly in a business environment? If you do, please send them to the chat box. But I'm going to move forward now, and I hope that was helpful, because one of the things that I wanted to bring you to was this slide here, which is the 10 tips summary. It's just a simple framework that I put together when Tanya asked me last year to put something together, 10 top tips, and thanks to Donna Murray for encouraging us to do this as well. So I'm going to roll through this, but I'm not just going to glide through it and tell you what's obviously there. There's dialogue in between each point. So if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions on anything here, please put them into the chat box. But I'm going to start with point number 1. Firstly, you need to register yourself, which you can do online. Go and register an ABN. Pretty simple. You can do it online. It doesn't take long. Get your ABN number. Now you're ready to trade. But then go and talk to an accountant. Because one of the things I did, and one of the mistakes I did for a long time, was I thought I could run the business myself. I thought I knew it all. I thought I could just do it all. You know, I'm doing all this stuff online. I've registered an ABN. I'm trading. I've got an invoice book. I've got a laptop. I'm ready to go. But what I realized was once the business became more substantiated, there were things that if I'd known an accountant could share with me earlier from day one, I really wish I had done that. They do help you to understand the maths of running a business, but also the benefits of running a business. They'll also tell you how much tax you got to pay. That's right. We got to pay tax. Tax doesn't escape us because you registered your ABN, which allows the taxation office to map you and map your turnover. So go and talk to an accountant. He'll also have a bookkeeper. And one of the greatest things they did for me was they set me up on an accounting system called Xero. That's right, Xero. It's a wonderful product that I pay a monthly subscription fee for. But that, again, is a tax write-off. My accountant writes that off because it's a business expense. I'm using that money to run my business. So we are lucky in our country. We have a taxation system that encourages us to be independent and run a business and write off our expenses. But also what the tax office, what the accountant helps me understand is, what are my tax obligations? Get familiar with those. Because I've seen our mob become successful in business and then spend a lot of money, or spend all the money and the profits, getting excited, and then we haven't had enough money to trade, or the tax office has given us a bill which then puts us into bankruptcy because we lack the capacity to pay it. It's one of the traps in business. So always put money aside to meet your tax obligations. So I run a couple of different bank accounts. I have one that I can trade on, and then I have one for tax. So I take money out of this account and I put it into this one and leave it there, so that when the accountant sends me the bill from the tax office, I'm not going, oh my goodness, I haven't got the money to pay that. Pay it on time, because you've saved the money, which comes with financial literacy. So I don't look at how much money I got in the bank and then go, oh, awesome, I can go and buy a brand new car or go and travel the world. No, I don't. I go, hang on a sec, put it aside, wait for the tax office to send their bill, pay it on time, which means you avoid the interest that they will charge you if you are late. And that can add up quickly as well. And they're actually happy with you and they leave you alone. When I say leave you alone, they still keep knocking every 3 months for you to pay, but they don't give me a hard time because they can see I'm paying. Or where I haven't got the money to pay them, I enter into a repayment plan, and the accountant can set that up for you. If you want to do that directly, good luck, because that'll take you forever. But if you've got an accountant doing it, they go and do it for you directly, because they have access to their own direct line. So they can get onto the tax office straight away, boom, prepayment plan locked in. Then you'd go and set it up at your bank with the automatic deductions to meet the arrangement with the tax office. I do that plenty of times. If a big bill comes in, I haven't got the money to pay. It doesn't mean I can't keep trading. It just means I can't spend a lot. I've got to look after my earnings, but I'm also looking after the tax office, because I know that we don't want to pay tax. No one likes paying tax. I get all that. But it's like death. It's unavoidable. You can't avoid it. So set yourself up for success. Put some money aside. Get an accountant. Set them up on an accounting system, on an invoice system that clearly every time you invoice, that Xero sends that message back to my accountant. So they can clearly see what I'm doing. So can my bookkeeper. So keep it transparent. Any thoughts, comments, or questions on points 1 and 2? Really good point here from Nosheen. I hope I'm saying her name well. Deepest apologies if I'm not. But one of the great comments we've got here is, hi, John, just wondering what a typical day looks like for you and how do you switch off? Interesting you say that, because I've just finished running a full day workshop for a government department on cultural competency training. And then I flew home. I've come straight here and I'm dialing on for this now, and I'll have some dinner after it. And that's when I'll switch off. But I do a bit of exercise. I go for a walk. Now, I won't be doing that tonight because it'll be too late. But I also do things that I really enjoy that have nothing to do with work. So I might go and watch a bit of Netflix. Or one of my favourite hobbies is riding motorbikes. So I'll jump on YouTube and I'll go and I'll hit up a couple of fellas that go and record their motorbike adventures, and I watch that. Because what it does, it takes me away from the pressure of running a business. It takes me away from the stress, worrying about bills and all that, because you need to do that for yourself, otherwise you'll burn out. I've experienced burnout. I understand what it feels like. I got so stressed a couple of years ago from running my business and not switching off that I actually had a panic attack, and I thought I was having a heart attack and I was going to die. That's right. That's what stress can do. Now, you probably already know that, particularly if you're a health professional. But I'm happy to share that because I'm not bulletproof. And I want to share vulnerability and the power of showing weakness, and that you're not always deadly. So I'm glad that the comments come in through around how do you switch off? Do something you love. that's got nothing to do with work. Now, if that's reading a book, going for a long walk on the beach, cooking, whatever it might be, go and do it, but set time aside to do it. Factor it in. So I write in my diary what my work obligations are, and then I also write what I'm going to do at the end of the day that's switched off and enjoyable. It might be just like I said, sitting on the couch, flicking through YouTube or Netflix. Who cares? As long as my mind switches off, it helps me rest, then I sleep well. Because one of the things about stress is it affects your sleep. If you already know that, that's great. That's called validation. But I've found that since I've been looking after myself and having that work-life balance, that I've been able to sleep better. Then I get up next morning, I'm refreshed, and I can start again. But I don't do that 5 days a week, every day of the year. Sometimes I'll write in time to stop, have a long weekend, go and do some camping or do something fun with the family. Do something that you find gives you pleasure. Great comment. Thanks so much for bringing that through the chat box. I'm going to move forward now because there's a couple other things I wanted to share. And that's about your capability statement. I talked about that earlier. So what do you offer? Now, remember I said before, my first capability statement, 24 pages. Yeah, really good information. But how many people are going to really read all of that? Not a lot. So now I've got a short version, a couple of pages, 2 or 3 pages. So I'll send both versions. I'll send the short one. That's the one that's probably going to get read the most and picked up on. And then I'll send the longer version that someone might want to keep in their records to further explore what do you offer. But get someone to help you with that. Yes, you can go on Google and get a template, how to build a capability statement. You can do anything on Google. You know this. But I'd go and pay a professional. Again, whatever their fees are, if you can afford it, pay it. Because your accountant or your bookkeeper will make sure that that becomes, again, a tax deduction against your turnover. So it's not all doom and gloom, having expenses or overheads. I've always lived on the philosophy, you need money to make money. But I'm not saying you need larger volumes of money to do it, but it is helpful to have something you can trade with, to engage with other professional help. So point number 5 is develop a business strategy and review it regularly. So review it honestly, be upfront with yourself, get others to look at it, go and find some peers, some friends, socially and professionally, that can look at your strategy that you're happy to share with, to get feedback so you can measure the work, measure your goals. Again, I don't have a complex strategy. It's pretty simple. I look at my core business. What do I offer and how do I get there? How do I execute what I offer? What do I need in between what do I offer versus execute? What's in between here? You need to map that, because the other extension of executing it is knowing that when a client is happy, how do I know that? Well, I want to measure my success by making my client happy. Ask. Run surveys or evaluations. Ask people what they didn't like about what you offered. It's really hard to hear that, and it hurts sometimes, but it's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable in the interest of professional development. So if you want to be entrepreneurial, be okay with someone saying, oh, you know what? I didn't like how you did that, or I don't like that product, or maybe you could do this to improve it. Listen to that, because we don't always have the answers. So put that in your strategy to seek regular feedback and regular reviews. One of the great things I love about working for myself is the independence. So I could create my own logo. As you can see, the orange boomerangs. Pretty simple. I didn't try to make that too complex, but I went and got some help to do it. I paid someone, a marketing specialist. I said, look, this is what I offer. This is what I do. This is my goals. What can you do for me? And of course, they created those banners. They put all that together for me. Yeah, it wasn't cheap, but again, it was a tax deduction. So when you're thinking about your logo, your branding, your website, and your marketing, go and pay a professional. Unless you've got experience in that, good luck. Because I have 3 levels of mentors that I recommend to people. A professional mentor. So somebody that you can talk about business with, that you can talk about, what's the appropriate logo, branding, marketing, website. What do I need to know? Talk to a professional. Now, if you've got someone that'll do it for free, that's awesome. We call that deadly, you know that. But some people want to be charging you for that. Be okay with that. But then there's a cultural mentor. So there's professional, then there's cultural. So I go and talk to someone else that's Indigenous, that runs a business, and talk to them about how they're going blending 2 worlds, living in 2 worlds. What challenges are they experiencing? What support are they receiving? And that becomes mutual. So there's professional mentor, cultural mentor, and then I have a buddy, just someone I can just have a water cooler conversation with. That's the 3 levels of what I call successful mentoring. And that's what we recommend when I'm consulting to a company around how do I make retention work well? We'll go get someone to talk to our mob in a professional context, then go find someone they can talk about culture with, and then just go and find someone they can talk to someone about any time, about anything, who's just there to listen. So the buddy system is really powerful. So that might be your partner, it could be your uncle, could be your auntie, someone close to you in your family, it might be your neighbour, who knows? But look at those 3 levels of support. Earlier we talked about social media and I talked about the fear of being trolled. So think about your posts. Before I put up a post, I read it about 4 times. I check the punctuation. I read it again, then I stop. Then I come back and read it again. I do a lot before I post. Very rarely do I just post on the skip, on the hop, or quickly. I don't do it impulsively because I don't want my message to be misinterpreted. I want it to be clear, but also diverse. Because one of the things about doing updates is that you need to continually update what you're doing, but you can't just keep saying the same thing over and over, or yourself, people will just drop off. So you've got to mix it up. But mix it up with different pieces of information that promote your business. So I'll put up a post probably tomorrow morning now. I won't do it later because I'll do what we reminded ourselves of before, which is to switch off and go and do something we enjoy. But in the morning, I'll get up bright and early, and that's the other thing. I get up early after I've had enough sleep. I set the alarm every day, 5:30, 6 o'clock, depending on what I got on. And I make sure I get up, make the bed. I know that might sound a bit mundane, but it tells me the first thing I'm about to do is something to complete. So it's a small task. I make the bed. Now, that might be a bit too private and a bit too personal, but what I'm trying to remind you of is that I get up in the morning with a structure. So I get up in the morning, I make the bed, and then all of a sudden my first task is finished, but also like the clean look of starting organised, being organised. So if you've got chaos all over the place, it's really hard to run a business well. And I mean chaos, not just physical things laying around everywhere, but also your relationships. It's really difficult when you think about relationship management. It's not just with your clients, but it's with your partner, your family, your children. We all know that feeling we get inside our stomach when we feel hurt. So we can let that consume us and get in the way of how we speak to our clients because we're feeling hurt. That's where that emotional intelligence plays a big role in making sure that you're doing the right things to manage your relationships well, professionally and personally. The other thing I talked about earlier was market research. What are your competitors doing? Who will be your competitors? What are your main competitors? What are they doing well that the market seems to want? How much are they charging? Are you delivering products that they're purchasing cheaper than you? How come they're purchasing cheaper? Are they buying in volume, larger volumes, giving them a discount, allowing them to put it on the market at a cheaper rate than you can? Because before running my consulting firm and before I joined the public service, which I spent 15 years in, also my dad, we ran a tyre business for 5 years before I joined the public service. I went straight out of school and worked for my dad. And I was really lucky to do that because he taught me straight away the values of running a business. But that's called lived experience. So put yourself in a frame where you can get the experience. You might want to do volunteer work to get experience. But again, doing something's better than nothing. Don't procrastinate. Have a crack. Doing something is better than nothing. And look at mistakes as being learning opportunities, because your competitors have probably done all that. Particularly successful competitors. They haven't just gone from Xero to hero in one hit. It just doesn't work like that. Give yourself time, because that's what they've done. Because I bet you when they made a mistake, they didn't close the shop up or they didn't fall into a heap over that. They just keep going. So remind yourself to keep moving forward. Every day, do something that's forward advancing. And the biggest thing I wanted to talk about this evening before we start hearing from Q&A is emotional intelligence. And you might notice I've put a couple of things in there which again are about well-being. They are vital to know about your emotional intelligence. I talked about that at the start of the presentation. But what's also important to remind yourself is about humbug. So after self-care, how do we look after ourselves? Particularly around humbug. Now, I know that we want to give back to our mob and give back to our community, and absolutely, please continue to do that. But you've also got to think about excessive humbug, because what that does is it becomes detrimental to your motivation to continue working because of the external pressures that are coming from trying to meet your cultural obligations. So please look after your family, share your profits, do the right thing, but make sure that you spread that evenly so that you also reward yourself. Now, one thing I think we struggle with as Indigenous people is looking inwards and looking after ourselves, because we are so worried about looking after our mob. I get that. But you're really helpful to your mob if you're looking after yourself, because you're coming from that platform of strength that they're seeking, by the way, quite often. They're not always seeking money off you. Sometimes they're just seeking guidance or want to connect with you because you're having a crack and they can see you having a go. But that creates that positive ripple effect. So cultural obligations can get in the way of working effectively in a business. You need to cap that off. You need to put the gates up sometimes and be okay with saying no. I find saying no really hard, and maybe you do too. But if you do, remind yourself it's okay to say no. It's okay. And the biggest tip I want to do is to pay your tax. I said that earlier. It's what destroys a lot of businesses. They become really successful quickly and they go and spend the profits, and then tax time rocks up and they've got no money. So they go bankrupt. You can avoid that by being financially literate. Don't have more than one bank account. One for trading, one for tax. Really helpful. Look, I hope it's been helpful this evening. Just sharing my thoughts on 10 tips, summarizing those in a condensed version of running a business in 60 minutes. If you have any thoughts, comments or questions about this evening, please send them through the chat box. But before we wind it up for this evening, are there any further questions that people would like to explore before we depart the building as such? While you're thinking about that, I just wanted to share a little bit about our culture and just to say thanks to everyone for inviting me this evening to participate on this forum. It's been wonderful to join everyone, and I really feel privileged that people are asking me to share a bit about my business, without making me feel like I'm big noting. And it's important for us to remind ourselves, big noting has context. And sometimes being kind to yourself and looking inwards and looking after yourself and telling people that you are generating success is not big noting. So don't let shame get in the way of that. I just want to quickly finish off with what I love doing and where I first started my journey, which is doing this. And just to share that with you before I check the chat box, see if there's any further questions, and then depart the building. But check this out. Well, I hope that was good for our Zoom teague that many have experienced on these video conferences. I love just chucking the dig in. It's pretty random. I really enjoy sharing culture with people, so you can blend, you can live in two worlds, you can run a business well and still maintain your connection to your culture. So one of the questions that's come in here, and thanks everyone for the kind comments, but there is one question I did want to respond to, and that is not-for-profit versus sole operator. So I was a sole trader. So a sole trader just registered an ABN. I registered a sole trader. I was just sending people an invoice, getting paid, and then it just kept going like that. But as the business became a bit more, not so much sophisticated, but become a bit more, it grew and it became larger. One of the things that I found was I had to think about expanding, but not so much from a personnel. In other words, I didn't have to employ more people, but I needed to engage with professionals. As a sole trader, I was doing everything myself. But then I engaged the accountant, the bookkeeper, sometimes a financial advisor, my professional mentor, someone to help me with social media. They were kind of things that I really started to engage in. So I chose to run a for-profit business. So quite simply, I have to run a profit because I don't receive any government funding or any grants. So I need to run a profit, firstly so I can pay my bills, but also so I can float. So it's important to remember, if you're running a not-for-profit, quite often that means that you're running from a grant or a government-funded perspective, which is still fine, but you still need to manage those funds well and build your financial literacy, which is just such an important key element that goes with emotional intelligence. So I guess the message here is, if you're going to go non-for-profit, make sure you promote yourself as that, but also remind yourself of your financial literacy, because even if you are receiving grants and funding from different avenues, you still need to manage that well so that you can make it recurrent. Recurrent funding needs to have a demonstrative outcome. So great question there, and I hope I've answered that well, because it's a really important aspect of running a successful business, is being financially literate. So thanks everybody. I just want to say again, thanks to IHA for the opportunity to have this discussion. I realise I've just gone a little bit over time, but thanks so much to Nicole for the continual questions. As the chairperson of IHA, it's great to see you joined us, firstly, to take the time out, but also to ask questions that are helpful for our listeners. If anyone wants to hit me up and further on reflection, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Johnny Briggs, because can you believe it? There's actually two John Briggses there. So we have a bit of a laugh about this, but John Briggs is in construction through Intract. I'm Johnny Briggs on LinkedIn. But thanks everyone. I'm going to hand back over to our coordinator now, Kylie Struthers, who did a wonderful job of introducing. And thanks so much, Donna. Thank you so much for the kind comment. I love reaching out and helping people the best I can. I really hope today was helpful. But over to you, Kylie, just to cap off and share your thoughts and next steps with our audience. So Beautiful. Thanks so much to the audience, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. I think I can talk for all of our participants online this evening. That was just such a fantastic and such an engaging webinar. So we're really pleased to kick off our 2021 Professional Development Webinar Series for our IHA members. That was just beautiful. And when you play the dig, John, you just ground us again and keep us connected and enable us to have that space to really think through some of those conversations we've just had. So thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you. So from here on, participants, IHA will make sure that the top 10 tips summary and things like that will be definitely shared. As I mentioned, we're recording this, so obviously people can re-watch it and talk through it, watch it at your pace and reflect on some of those questions that John has posed for us. At IHA as well, we've sort of moved in the social media space, and Norsheen, who's been online, is doing a fabulous job for IHA in the background, but we're also on LinkedIn now as well. So we'll make sure we'll put Johnny Briggs on there in the LinkedIn. So if people are in LinkedIn, I know a few people are moving into that space, John, at the moment in terms of trying to establish themselves in this space. So we'll put all that information there as well. Can I just summarise, I guess, John, it was really lovely to listen to you talk through the top 10 tips, but there's real synergies in the work that we're doing in the IHA space. And thank you again for sharing your insights on the mentoring. Obviously, that talks to a lot of the work that IHA does in the mentoring space. And to me personally, I've always talked about the professional, cultural, personal roles of mentoring and how vital they are in our own journeys. So thank you for re-emphasising that. And I think we all took away some really good things, and your tips on the wellbeing and self-care. Just a gentle reminder to our IHA members that in 2020, as we were struggling with the year that was, we had our webinar, self-care webinar series. So if people would like to re-watch those, we've got those recordings available for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members. It might be a timely reminder to just take time to watch those webinars, because Nicole Turner was one of those presenters, John, as our chairperson, and she talked a lot about the importance of sleep. And the importance of routine and exercise and sleep. So you've just gently reminded me that I want to let our members know, don't forget those webinar series are there. If you want to reach out to us at IHA, we'll make sure that we can get those webinars to you. But thank you once again, John. It's always a great pleasure when IHA partners with you. And thank you on behalf of all our participants that have watched live this evening. But also that I know will be watching this recording as well. Take care, everybody. Good evening. Maybe practice a little bit of that self-care this evening and be gentle with yourselves. And we look forward to our next webinar series. Thanks again, everybody. Good evening.